one of the most common problems I see is that folks will be so excited getting into Dreamweaver, they'll forget to connect or make sure that their local root folder is connected to Dreamweaver. Well, how in the world do I do that? Okay, I know it's connected, so I just say get in the habit of doing this. If you're working on your own computer, technically you should only have to set up the site once. For some of you, this is going to be ad nauseum because you've heard me go over this 5,000 times, but it's worth doing it because once in a while doing this, somebody has an epiphany and realizes, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I'm doing wrong and none of my stuff is going to work because I did that. So I'm going to go through this. Before you start working in Dreamweaver, if you're not connected to your root folder in Dreamweaver, I'm not talking about the server, I'm not talking about remote, I'm just talking about your local root folder in Dreamweaver. If you're not connected, you don't have Dreamweaver helping you in the background. Unless you navigate to this hasn't automatically popped up. I'm going to go to Site, Manage Sites, and then I've got my Web 140 folder. And now I'm going to go in here. Here's the thing I say in my sleep. For this class, the local site folder should never be any deeper than Web 140. The exception to that being, even though it's out of the scope of this assignment, I'm going to mention it. Sometimes you have to fudge around with this a little bit when you're working with Bootstrap, but we'll address that later. That's out of the scope of this assignment. For this assignment and for everything you do that's required in this class, we use one site, Web 140, and you never, ever, in this local site folder, go any deeper than that. If you do, on the server, you're going to end up with folders inside of folders, and that's a mess. Happens to somebody every semester because they forget, and they go into their vicious cycles folder from here, and then instead of dumping those files when they upload to the server into their vicious cycles folder, they're just dumping them loose in their website, and they have them in two different places, and that's a mess. So there's usually an epiphany for somebody right there. But make sure this looks like this. Take a minute to check it. If you use multiple sites, well, maybe you're not in Web 140. Maybe you see I have several here. Maybe you're in another site. Just make sure you're where you're supposed to be, because that tells Dreamweaver, okay, this is the site that you're going to be my personal secretary with, and you're going to help me make sure that all my file paths work and everything does what it's supposed to do and goes where it's supposed to go. So this is what sets Dreamweaver apart from using one of the other text editors. Much as I love Brackets, Dreamweaver does some stuff that Brackets does not do. Okay, so this is all I have to do to make sure that I'm connected to the local root folder. I don't have to even connect to the server to work. I could click Save, Save, Done, work right here, and not connect to the server until I'm ready to upload. But I have to do this, or else Dreamweaver is going to save with absolute file paths. That means to a specific file in a specific folder on your computer, rather than to relative file paths, which is what you want, so that it's going to work on your local site on your computer, and the same paths are also going to work when you upload to the server. Now you can see this in action when you create a new HTML page before you save that page. And it's a great way to watch it. We'll watch that in just a minute, because before you save the page, it's going to give you the absolute file path. Then you get to see Dreamweaver's worth their weight in gold, because when you save that file, she automatically changes that file path to a relative path that's going to work on your computer, in your Vicious Cycles folder, in your Web 140 folder, and it's also going to work on the server as well, without trying to look for a file particularly on your computer. Okay, if you need more explanation of that, touch base with me. But that, like I said, every time I do this, that's an epiphany for somebody because they've had that problem. So now we go to servers. Okay, humor me, for some of you all, this is just something you can do in your sleep, and maybe you do it in your sleep, but or dream about it. You've done it so much. But I'm going to step through this really quick. Inside of this, server name is, I just call it WCET. The server name doesn't matter. That's for me. Nobody else sees that. We're using an FTP connection. Our FTP address is wce2.waketech.edu. I'm using my username, which is the format that was given to me at the beginning of the class. I'm using my password, uppercase, lowercase, uppercase, lowercase, lowercase, last 4 digits of the student ID, and then I'm going to click test. Now, the second most common mistake people make is when they're working either the first time or they're working on a different computer and have to do this again, you want to test it here because you want to know if you make a mistake with your username and password. But after you click test the first time, it is critical. You have to go back and type web 140. It'll put its own / in, but you just type web 140 right here. You do not fill out this web URL. That's self-populating. Leave that alone. That fills out itself. Don't do that. You can cause more trouble than you fix if you try to stick that in, because if you make a typo, it makes a mess. Okay, so you have to make sure that says root directory. What happens if you don't put web 140 root directory in there? Well, nothing, you think, because everything seems to be working peachy keen as you expect it to work. Everything is uploading until you go try to find your file path. Because without web 140 there, your files, your vicious cycle folder and your vicious cycle file are not inside of web 140. They're sitting on top of it. And I give the example, it's like putting files on top of a file cabinet instead of inside it. So to get your files where they're supposed to be, you must make sure this says web 140. Do not fill in the web URL yourself. That's self-populating. So if you're running XAMPP and Dreamweaver at the same time, make sure you shut off XAMPP before you run Dreamweaver. Use the preview in Dreamweaver for Dreamweaver that'll give you a more accurate representation within the constraints of Dreamweaver and what that's doing in the background for you. If you've got all this stuff going in every which direction, sometimes they step on each other's toes and you can wind up with file management issues. And that can happen to anybody. So you want to use one resource at a time. If you're using Dreamweaver, make sure XAMPP is shut off. Make sure virtual machines are shut off. If you're using them, make sure Dreamweaver will time herself out after 30 minutes. So you don't have to go back and turn anything off like you do in XAMPP. Okay, more options. Generally, you have to do nothing here, but I'm just showing you it should be use passive FTP and use FTP performance optimization. Over here in advanced, don't do anything. This is for the testing server, automatically push files. Do not repeat. Do not check automatically upload files to server on save. Because when you're working locally, a lot of times you make mistakes or decide you want to change something before you upload it. You keep your upload as your most pristine version of your site until you do something better that you're going to do over top of it. If you do this automatically upload files to the server on save, you're overriding it every time you save. So you don't have anything to go back to. Make sure that is not checked. It doesn't check by default, but I've seen a couple people lately how, unbeknownst to them, that got checked. I don't know what happened. Okay, back to basic. You really should never have to go outside of basic. I'm just showing you what that looks like, so that you won't be tempted to look behind the secret door thinking it's something wonderful, because really it's out of the scope of what we're doing right now. So this is what you want. Then of course you're going to go save, and done. Okay, then I can click on this little corner icon, and I never want to change this here to preview. It's too easy to get it confused. It's a good idea, best practice at this point, to always look at your local on the right, always look at your remote on the left. That way you don't end up accidentally overwriting your new file with an old file, which happens every semester. So be careful with this right now. We're all going in a lot of different directions. Keep it as simple as you possibly can. So I want to see what I have right now on the server. So I'm going to click my little expand to show local and remote. And this is very similar on a Mac. And here, my favorite little icon in the entire world, connect to the remote server. So you click that, and then that'll show you. I had done this a little while ago, so mine's already showing up. Now, if you don't see Web 140 at the top of this remote server, lights should flash in your head and bells should go off, because that means that when you set up your site, you didn't go back and put Web 140 after you tested your username and password, and you're doing exactly what I said is not good to do, and you're uploading them to a folder on top of your on top of your Web on 4D folder instead of inside it. It should look pretty much like this, okay? Something like this. If you don't have an image folder, fine. I like to keep an image folder. Generally, I also have a CSS folder, but just so that it's less confusing, and for what we're doing right now, I left it nice and simple like this. Just make sure whatever you do consistently. Your local root folder and your remote folder should pretty much mirror each other, except on your local folder, you have work in progress that you upload when you're totally finished with it. Okay, so now we have that. Hopefully there was a light bulb moment in there for somebody that was having trouble with this to some extent. So now we're going to go through, we're going to create a file, we're going to create some navigation, we're going to link all our files together, and we're going to add all the elements that we have to have for this assignment. And we can do that really fast. It's okay. Sure. I have a question. Is it okay to place your social media icons in the footer next to the business email? Sure, that's where I like them too. But you don't have to put them there. But I think that's a great place for them. Some people like to put them in the header. Some people like to put them in a side on just one page on all the pages. I like them on every page, but some people prefer just having them on the contact page. There's something that's up to you. And I'm never going to take off points because I don't like something. I'm only going to take off points if I have a valid reason why it's not the best application of the criteria of the assignment. So if I say I prefer it in the footer on every page and you put it in the header on one page, you're not going to get points taken off because you've met the criteria of the assignment just a little differently, and that's fine. Okay, so I have an index page right here. We'll go ahead and look at what I have. In the time-wise, I'm going to, I believe, work with pages that I have here. Now, unlike if you work with other FTP hosts and other server simulation or connect to the remote server in other ways, some of them don't automatically time out. Dreamweaver, for the most part, if you forget to shut it off, is going to automatically turn off in about 20 minutes to 30 minutes, depending on how you have it set by default. But it's a good idea to go up here and just click that adorable little icon, my favorite icon in the whole world, and just unplug it. And then I go back here so I see a view that I'm a little more familiar with. Okay, rather than, I'm going to do something a little different than what I said for right now, and I'm going to go and open a page that I've already created and show you how to do some of the things. Okay, so here I have a page. First of all, I'm going to show you an example of a semantically correct basic HTML5 page. This is nothing fancy. This is not going to win any Webby Award, but that's not where we are right now. We're technically representing that we understand the concepts of a basic HTML5 layout. That's the purpose of this assignment. Okay, I see something wrong right off the bat. In this Vicious Cycles logo, Vicious Cycles is part of the image. Anytime there are words that are part of an image, I need to make sure those words are represented in the alternative text. So I'm going to do Vicious Cycles logo for the alternative text. All right, and then I'll do File Save. Okay, now here on this page, here's my external style sheet. I have my HTML5 doc type, and here's my file. Well, I'm going to remove my style sheet because I'm going to go back and show you the easiest way to add a style sheet to a page. But I'm going to show you what happens, and this is going to be a good thing. My page should be laid out in a way that it still makes sense without CSS, without any of the styles. Not going to look great, but it should still make sense. So let's see what happens when I totally remove my style sheet. I'm going to go File, Save All, and now I'm going to preview this in Chrome. Okay, this is not pretty at all, but it's got the content, it's going to fall just in the order that I want it to fall on the page. So if something happened to my style, I can still convey the information. As I said, it's not going to look pretty, but it's going to make sense. And you need to make sure that that happens, because your page content in your HTML without the CSS is going to fall just the way you put it in there. And without the CSS telling it what width to be, it's going to go all the way across the page. Okay? So 4 kinds of styles, really. We have an external style sheet that I'm going to show you how to attach right now. We have internal styles, and they would be in the head of a document. We have inline styles, which you're going to use rarely, but you add a CSS style to a particular element on the page. That's like a phrase or something that's only in one place on a whole page or on a whole site. But you never used HTML5 styling elements. That's old, passe, past due, no reason to use it at all anymore. It's deprecated, it's gone. So even though it will render, it's wrong. So you want to make sure that you're using ideally external CSS, because it's so much easier. Okay, and let's say I've created a new page, I've just put my content in it, and I want to connect it to the CSS that I already have for this site. So the easiest way to do this is just to click anywhere. You don't have to click in the right place. I can click anywhere in the, let me go ahead and save this page first. I can click anywhere in the HTML part of it. Then I'm going to right click, and I'm going to come down to Attach Style Sheet, and this is all really similar on a Mac. And then it's going to go to Browse. I'm going to browse. I'm going to make sure I'm where I think I am, inside my Web 140 root folder, inside Vicious Cycles. It's on my desktop. And then I'm going to see my style sheet. Depending on how your computer's set up, you may not see the file extension right there. Doesn't mean it's not CSS. Just look over here to type and make sure it says CSS. I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to select OK. Then the correct add as is link. And then I'm going to click OK. And then just like that, I have a style attached to this page. And that's the easy way to do that. So I'm going to show you down here examples of Facebook and Twitter links, and then I'll backtrack a little bit and show you how I got them there. And it looks like, let's see, my Twitter appears not to have, well, it has, for some reason, it's little goodie isn't shown. I guess it'll show when I preview it. So I'm going to show you where these things are. In fact, I'll undo it and I'll redo it right here. Oops. Okay. Often, it's easier to do a lot of this in the code, but some things it's easier to do in the HTML design view. When you do it in design view, you want to make absolutely sure that you are where you think you are, because sometimes you can select something and have not as much selected as you maybe thought you had. So I'm going to go to these 2 little guys, and I'm going to add this again. So we're going to start here. And I'm going to remove my email link just so we can add this again. Show you where these are. Okay, so first thing I have to do, this is inside my footer, and the first thing I need to do is add the copyright right there. So I can click here, and I can see now that it's where I want it to be. So I'm going to go Insert, then I'm going to go here to HTML. I'm going to come down here to Character, and well, it doesn't think that I've selected it. So here we go. I'm going to try again. All right, I'm going to click right there. Once in a while, it's persnickety. Oh, and one other thing, there's an update to Dreamweaver. I'm going to advise you, do not, if you haven't downloaded it yet, don't download it yet, because I'm going to check and see if it changes anything that's going to be problematic, and I'll let you know ASAP if it does. So here, I'm just going to go ahead and stick my cursor right now in front of Vicious Cycles in the code. I'm going to go to Insert. I'm going to come down here to HTML. I'm going to go to character, and now I'm going to click copyright. And you can see it's going to, and you might know this, it's fine if you know it, easy to remember, ampersand copy for copyright, semicolon. But the advantage of doing it this way is it helps you not make a typo. So I have vicious cycles contact right there. Now I'm going to make this an email. So I'm going to highlight it. I don't have to have anything there. I can do what I'm going to do without that. But since I have it there, I'm going to leave it. Now I'm going to go to insert. I'm going to go to HTML. And about 2/3 of the way down the page, I have email link. Now that's going to prompt me. Sometimes it will show the text. Let's see. And sometimes it will not. So in this particular case, I'm going to try to get it to show the text in this box because that just makes it easier. Generally, I don't type anything first. I just go, I'll do it this way because it's the easiest way. I'll just go, I'll click where I want it to be, and then I'll go insert, and then I'll go to HTML, and I'll go to email link, and I want the text to be contact vicious cycles, Control V, and then the email, and I'm just going to make it up, vicious cycles. It's going to test for an email, but it's not going to test and see if it's correct. And make sure you spell things correctly. I'm famous for hitting an extra letter in here, so I have to look carefully. Vicious cycles at gmail.com. Don't use your own because that can get you, it can cause some problems for you. So just make up an email address there, then click OK. And you see it just automatically adds it to your page. And that's just peach keen, exactly fine what you want it to do. So then with Facebook and Twitter, what you're going to do is you're going to have an image here, and you're going to click on the image, and then you're going to go to insert, and then you're going to go to hyperlink. And okay, let's see. Let me see if I can. Oh, I see somebody. Hang on just a jiffy. I'll see if I can. I've got somebody trying to get in here, and it's not letting me get up to the menu. Hang on. There we go. All right. Okay, hopefully everybody that wanted to come in got in. And so generally, this one's already here, but generally I'm going to wrap it around the image because I've just got the image here, and I'm going to wrap the link around it. So that's what it would be. And then it's going to allow me to type in https://www.facebook.com. The other way to do it is to highlight it and then go to here to window and go to properties and make sure you have this selected. Let me go to here again. Oops. So much that. Okay. Oh, look, and then that closed without saving. That's one thing about Dreamweaver and autosave. Not really reliable. You want to get in the habit of Control S-ing all the time. So I'm going to go back here again. I'm going to attach my style sheet. I'm going to browse. Good practice, though. Cycle CSS. Okay. Yeah. And do what I say, not what I do, because obviously I didn't save. You want to make sure that's linked, click OK. Now I'm going to go Control S. And the way I know that it's saved is that the little asterisk's not there anymore. So coming back down here, I'm going to highlight one of these icons. And if I go up here to Window and then Properties, it's going to show me in the link. And this is where I paste the link if I didn't already have it there. Under HTML, you can just paste the link right there. And remember, you want to do target _blank. That opens it in a new window. And it's a good idea to put a title there. That's helpful, and it also helps search engine. And I would say Facebook us. or just whatever, visit us on Facebook or something. And then you can click away and then file, save, or Control S, however you do it. Then the same thing, I can just keep this open. The same thing for Twitter down here. I can type in or copy paste the address, _blank, and then I'm going to click tweet us, and that's just the title that pops up. And the document title is Vicious Cycle, page properties. I don't really need that right now. Okay, and I can see that that's right here. And I can see that I am linking to that page, and I've got all the content that I need there. Okay, so I'm going to close that. Now we're going to go a minute and take a look at our CSS, because we're going to run out of time shortly. We've got about 25 minutes. I want to go about 10 more, and then I want to take some questions if we can. So be thinking of any questions that you might have. Let me quickly go down this landing page, because the landing page is going to be most likely your most important. And let's just look at the structure of this, because this is a semantically correct, very basic HTML5 page, which is obviously what we're looking for in this class. I'm using external style sheet. Now, if I had any internal styles before the head closing tag, I'd have open and a closed style bracket, and then there might be styles in there. If that's a style that it should affect everything, and I've accidentally put it on all my pages, all I have to do is cut it off the pages, put it once in the external style sheet, and then remove the style opening and closing brackets from the internal, from here on the page above the head tag, and then it's all in our HTML. But I might have an internal style if I want to do something totally unique to this page with text or with an image or with my layout or something, that I want to do something totally unique. It is appropriate and absolutely fine to use an internal style. Just, I don't want to see them there accidentally when I can tell, because it's on every single page, that you thought you had it in the CSS and you didn't. So it's fine to use that for a reason. It's fine to use a span tag to name a class for a couple of words. It's not fine to use HTML to center text, to give text a color, to do anything like that right in the HTML. That's old ways. When browsers didn't understand CSS, they do now, and now we keep content separate from design. So I will take off points if you have HTML styles in your document. So looking down here, I have my div container that is holding all of my content inside my body tag. And I know that if I want to see it on a page, it has to be inside the body tag. Now, HTML5 is very forgiving. And when you preview something, if you have stuff outside of the body tag, when you preview it locally, you're going to be able to see it. When you preview it remotely, once in a while you can see it too, but it's wrong, and I would take off points for that. All of your content, all of your materials that compose your semantic structure must be inside the body opening and closing tag. So the first thing I have is container. That's the generic container that is holding all my content. And at first, that makes it easier for you to make things do what you want them to do. In this particular instance, I have a Vicious Cycles logo image that I've given a width and a height. I don't usually do this. I usually make them responsive and put the size in my CSS. I may not have gotten there for this one. I usually even do it with my logo, but this is not wrong. This is one thing that for an image, you can have this here. The responsive is nice, but not required for this class. Generally, you have only one nav per page. Here's nav with an unordered list. Inside the unordered list, we have 5 list elements. And each one of those links to a page. This is our working navigation. I can create it on one page and then copy and paste from the nav opening to the nav closing tag on every other page in the exact same place. And I have my working navigation across the board. Voila, easy. Don't make that harder than it is. So you just have to make sure that these files are where another common problem, these files have to be where you've told the browser it's going to be. What this says is all these files are together at the same level, and we can see that's exactly where they are here on my local site, and we can see that's exactly where they are here on the remote server. I have all the files together like that. So there, you just see the file name. That tells us all these files are together in the same folder. Okay, so now I'm going to go back here. All right, so moving right along. And then I have an aside that falls next. An aside is sort of like a sidebar, but aside is the semantic element inside that sidebar or that aside, which I'm just having it as a HTML5 element. It's got a heading, and then it has an ordered list because I'm listing events that happen in an order, so that justifies an ordered list. Then I have a paragraph. All of this is in the aside, and that tells me that it's content that is meaningful together. An article, if you use article, that's content that makes sense totally on its own. It was related to what the rest of the content is, but you could use it by itself and it would still make perfect sense. So try and use the HTML5 elements as they were intended. Okay. Then next we have the main element, and you can put a lot of things inside a main, but you can't put main inside of anything except your container or on the page, because it's your main content holder. That's what it is. Okay, so inside main, I have a heading 2. And now notice I have a heading 2, which to be able to use a heading 2, I have to have already used a heading 1. You must nest headings in order. In other words, I can't use a heading 3 before I use a heading 2. I can only use now, eventually this will be different, I can only use one heading 1 per page. Generally, that's the main title of the page. And then I see I have an H2, and then on another H2, and then I have an H3, and then I think in the footer, no, I don't have an H4, but I have one H2, H3. You can see that they're nested in order. That's correct. That's how that has to be. Okay, then my ordered list, I've got that. Then I come on down. Now you'll notice I'm using a lot of lorem ipsum here. On your page, you do have content. Most of your main landing page should be actual content that you've crafted for the landing page. I realize you're going to have filler text on other pages, but most of this page should be the content that came out of your original specs so that you meet the client's criteria. All right. So inside main, I have an H2, and then I have a section that I'm going to call top. And notice that I didn't make this a div. I made this a section with the class name of top. That way it has its semantic structure as a section, but I still can treat it independently as a class. I can treat it differently than other sections. So this is a good way to do that. And I just encourage people to use classes instead of IDs all the time. That's just because IDs can be bullies, and they can trickle down parts of the style rule because they have a stronger specificity than anything else, and they can affect child elements on down the line that you don't realize they're affecting. So especially when folks are first starting out, I encourage them to use classes instead of styles because it's a lot easier. I mean, classes instead of IDs because it's a lot easier to know just what rules that's conveying and where it's conveying them. You can ask me questions about that if I just totally confused you. I hope I didn't. Okay, now in here we see that we have 2 external links. So I have an external link to Wake Tech Individualized Learning Center. And the way I would do that is I would highlight the word. And then one way to do it, I can go Window, and I can go to Properties. And I can see in Properties that right here I can paste the file path to that external link. And it doesn't just say click here or anything. It totally makes sense out of context. Wake Tech Individualized Learning Center, that's where it's going to take me. And then I can see that I've said to open a new window _blank. That's important. And then the title is ILC homepage. Okay. You can also highlight it and go insert hyperlink. And basically you get the same thing. But I think sometimes it's easier to just do stuff in the properties because you can use it for so much. It's just handy to keep it around. And also notice this is a little check mark down here. If that's a red check, it's called linting, and it'll help you with errors. We won't have time to get into that right now, but that's a very helpful little feature that hasn't been around too terribly long, but I encourage you to bond with it. It's HTML, CSS, and they also have it for PHP and JavaScript, which can be really helpful. But just pay attention to that little thing. If you see a red X, you want to fix your errors before you go forward, because that means something's happening here that you might not want to happen, or something's not working because maybe you didn't put a style or a element incorrectly, and when you fix it, it might make changes that you've been trying to make otherwise. Okay, and there's another outside link, same thing. I typed in WRAL weather radar, I highlighted it, and then I pasted a link to the WRAL weather there, _blank, and then in the title of WRAL radar. Okay, and it's telling me all along here the document title. So that's how to add the external links. So we've talked about the external links, we've talked about the symbols, we've talked about email, we've talked about adding the external style sheet, we've talked about the navigation, and it's really fun, I think, to create navigation, because what you do when you do that, and this is already done, of course, but the way that you do it is I want to scroll over this guy right now. Yep, that's what I want. I'm going to scroll over here, and let's say this wasn't created, but I would just highlight inside this. I'd highlight vicious cycles. This is one time I do it I do a lot in the HTML, but this, I like to do the navigation here. It just seems to work better. And then vicious cycles on every page is going to connect to the same page, which is the index page. You can see it's already done there, but the way I created that was to click on this little point to file link, and I drag it up here until I get to the index icon right there, and then I just let it go, and then it's going to say index.html right here. Isn't that fun? And then the next one, I'm going to highlight about us, and we're going to make sure I get all the letters, and then again I get this cute little point to file. I drag it, left click and hold it and drag it up until I get to the about icon right there. These are already there. I'm just showing you the process so that you can do it with one you haven't done. And I let go, and you can see about's right there. Now, I'll need to come back and do _blank. That hasn't been done yet. And then a title for that page. I'll just do the example right here. And I can say learn. I try to do it something different than what the text already says, something that gives a little more information. In this case, I'm just going to put learn who we are. Okay, and then I can see that this page connects to about. So then the same thing with our bikes. I highlight that. I can see that says bikes. And as I highlight each one, then I can come in here _set blank, and that one's merchandise. You can have it the same as the page name. I just think that can be redundant, so I like to do it something a little more interesting. So I'd probably put vicious cycles, totally legitimate, good for search engine, and oops, didn't mean to do that. Good for search engine, but optimization and totally legitimate. I put my name of the business in everywhere that I can. So, for example, I have it there too, and then I can see it as my title right there. Of course, this is not an image, so I don't need alternative text per se. And so on and on like that. So this is how I'm adding all my components. Now, while we're here, we know that this was a vertical list to begin with. Let's take a minute and look real quick at how we move that to horizontal navigation. And here's how we do that. So the old-fashioned way to do that was to use float and float everything to the left. But the thing about float, when you use it for everything, is what you find out is as soon as you apply float, everything starts going all wonky because the parent element that's holding your list, once you float it, doesn't know it's there. It's sort of floating above that layer. So I like to use something that's got a little more substance, that I don't have to then worry about going to give it a height, because I might not want to give it a fixed height. I might want that to be a little fluid too, depending on what size the page is. So here's what I'm going to do. I have my vertical list navigation that start out looking kind of like this. So I start with a nav, and the first thing I do in the nav is I'm going to give it a width of 100%. Now, going back to the box model, there's something really important. It's a hack, but it helps with a lot of stuff we're doing. I always zero out all the margin and padding on the whole page. That gives me control of everything, because the browser will add margins and paddings everywhere if you don't. So this way, this will get rid of all the margins and paddings, and then you go back and add them just as you need it. And then you can use 100%, because you remember your box model where you have to add content plus padding plus border plus margin. It makes it easier to keep track of all that too, because you don't have to worry about how much border and how much margin each different browser is adding. You can add it or not add it depending on what you want. So in this particular case, I did 100%. Now, I have padding at 1%, which is inside that, and technically this would be 98%, and then the padding would fill up the additional 2%. So that's the best practices way to do it. With CSS3, there's some other things that come into play that are kind of out of the scope of this. So just keep in mind that when you're creating content, you have to consider that it's not just the size of the content in the element. You also have to add the padding and the margin and the border so that you know how much space that's going to take up. And that when you can't get things to go side by side, usually it's because you haven't considered how much width you actually have to work with. So that's what I'm sort of showing you here. So what we did here, so that we can use display inline block, we had to give the parent element a width up here. So we give the navigation a width of 100%. And then we took off the bullets that are automatically at the beginning of a list by list style type none. And then this 16% means I want each of the elements to be 16% of the 100% that I have to work with in the navigation container. So that still gives me some to play with. Then I did display inline block. And what that does, that's what makes it go side to side. Let me comment this out and I'll show you what happens without this. See? So it's display inline block that takes it from vertical navigation to horizontal navigation, but your container needs to have a width for that to work properly. So now we're going to take that back. We're going to go File, Save All. And sometimes it takes a minute to catch up with you. Sometimes you got to go back and forth once so it catches up, but don't worry. And remember, this is the refresh button. This is a sync button. Do not click this button. That's going to synchronize with the server. Do not do that. Click this button to refresh a page. Click the refresh button to refresh a page. Do not click that one. Refresh is here. It's one arrow. Sync is here. That can cause you a bunch of trouble if you're not ready to update stuff. Okay, so we saw in the CSS for the navigation how we took this very simply, made this vertical list horizontal navigation by giving the nav element a width, giving it a background color, and then the requirement is working navigation that works across all pages. And that's what this does right here. Now you'll notice that this says nav ULLI. If I didn't have the nav here, then it would make every list, including this list, horizontal, which is not what I want. That's why I did it compound, so it only applies to the list and the UL inside the navigation. Then I handled this one totally separate. And all I told this one here was to put the numbers inside of the text box. And then I have aside, floating to the left, and it's 30%. I have the main content area floating to the right, it's 60%. And then the footer, which is down here at the bottom, here's a magic trick that usually is a great revelation for somebody, if not everybody. If I don't tell that footer to go to the bottom by clearing both the main and the aside, watch what happens. I'm going to apply a comment here. And now let's see where that footer go. That footer found a neat little place to fit right between those two things, because it's going to go where it fits unless you tell it otherwise. So with saying clear both, I'm telling it to clear both of those elements that are before it and stay down at the bottom where you belong. I'll remove that right there, and then it'll go back down to the bottom where it belongs. You should, there are mixed feelings really right now about this. The criteria of the assignment says that the external links need to open in a new window. The criteria doesn't say, and usually in this day and age, screen readers are as such where it's kind of tiresome for every single page to open in a new window. So they're not really doing that as much as they used to do that. But for the specs of this assignment, your external links are required to open as underscore blank. It's required for the two elements that go to the external pages. And according to the specs, if you did underscore blank for your other navigation, that's fine too. As you can see, I used a lot of percentages. I think it's simple to do it in this manner. Let's just preview. I did this for a demo. I don't remember. I think I have everything working. Well, let's look and see. Let's pretend we're checking this one and see what's going on here, because I don't remember about the other pages. Some files needed to preview need to be saved. Yes, save all. Okay, so let's look and see if our links work as they should on every page. Right now I'm on the Vicious Cycles page. Now I'm going to go to About Us, and you can see how this identifies the unique page. This identifies the site. A lot of times you'll see this reversed. I like it this way because that it's just easier to see first what the unique page is. Some people put the site name first. I haven't looked at the analytics. It maybe if you put Vicious Cycles first, that gives it a tiny bit of an edge as far as SEO. But I like it this way because this shows us first which unique page we're on. Our bikes, events, contact us. Now, of course, you're going to have more content than I have here, but I don't expect you to have anything but the homepage totally filled with 100% Vicious Cycles content. And this wouldn't show up on this page. I was just demonstrating some concepts here. I wouldn't have that redundant like that. So, but the point I was showing is you have to use heading 1 before you can use heading 2. So if I didn't use heading 1 here, I would probably make heading 1 here on my main area. And then I would make this a heading 2. And then this might be a heading 2 or heading 3, depending. Just think about it like an outline. And then this will be a heading 2 over here. So you have to nest headings in order. And you can see here, it's okay not to have responsive images. If you know how to play with that and give it a little bit of make your images responsive, that's fine, but it's not required. I showed some people how to do it in the ILC, but it's definitely not, you don't have to do it. Some people really wanted to do it, but as long as you provide something like this that's appropriate for the content, that would be just fine. The point of this is to make sure that you have all the required elements and that you're demonstrating a basic understanding that I see your obvious, carefully selected font choices. It's not just showing up with the default fonts. And there's some rhyme or reason to the page layout. You want to make sure that you've got plenty of white space. These pages here are simply the very basics to show the components. These aren't an example of style pages. I have some examples. Okay. Show an example of content on the page, how you show who, where, what, why. There are a lot of different ways to do that. And here's just one example of how Trader Joe's does it, and how maybe the font choices wouldn't be appropriate for everything, but because of the brand of Trader Joe's, these font choices work for that. compelling imagery, how the right image can convey information, but it has to be carefully selected to make sure that it does just that. And you have to have enough text to indicate what you are trying to convey. These are heat maps to help you decide where to put that key information on the landing page so that the user is going to be drawn to it immediately and you'll keep them on your site. Repetition of design and content element promotes unity, maintains visual identity, and creates visual consistency. Throughout that web design introductory book, they give you some good examples. Here's another example of consistency on a page. Mobile not required. I think this is just a really nicely done site. Within a few words, it really conveys the message of what this site does and what they are trying to convey. Not many words at all, good color scheme, good font choices, and you just sort of get it. It's easy to figure out exactly what's going on here because all of it works together really well to convey the message. Fonts can set a mood.